The Marinade.
There's no O in Marinade. Let's try it one more time. Ready? 1, 2, 3.
The Marinade. Marrow.
Marinade.
Bone marinade. The
That's
Marinade.
The Marinade. With Jason Earle. Welcome to The Marinade with Jason Earle, a free-flowing conversation about the creative process with creative people. This is episode 133, and our guest is Gabe Larson. Gabe is the creative force behind the band Waldemar. Waldemar's stunning new record, Ruthless, is on the way this coming May 5th, y'all. I have needed music now more than almost any time in my life, and Ruthless has been a steady, helpful companion during a very difficult season. I caught up with Gabe via Zoom, and we ended up doubling the expected time. We just kept talking and had such a great time. He's a thoughtful and fascinating guy, and I'm so excited to bring you my conversation with Gabe Larson of Waldemar.
Hey, Jason, can you hear me?
Yeah, man, I got you. You got me?
Yeah, I got you, dude. Hey, it's really good to talk to you, man.
Likewise. Thank you so much for doing this. I'm really excited for this. I've been really looking forward to it.
Me too. I've been listening to a lot of your podcasts since Josh sent it my way, and I've been very, very, very stoked to chat. I love the show and love a lot of the guests that you've had on, and I've been stoked, man.
Oh, wow. Thank you. That means a lot to me. It always means a lot when folks listen, and especially folks I'm going to talk to, and especially folks whose work I've been spending so much time with. My new ritual is I burn a CD when I get a record, the
Heck yeah.
MP3s, right? And then I listen to it on my commute. So you've been my constant companion. Your record,
sweet.
Your record has been a constant companion. So, it's so beautiful, man. It is such a beautiful record.
Thank you.
And it's like, it's a record I needed and I didn't know I needed. There's a lot. There are a couple of songs that I'm looking forward to diving into because they are just speaking to me, to the moment that I'm going through right now that's been really difficult for the past 10 months or so. And and has given me like a little bit of hope. There's like, I was thinking about it earlier today. I was like, how do you describe this thing? And I was thinking about how there's a feel of, like, you know what I mean? There's a feel of melancholy, but also hopefulness. It's almost like teetering, right, on those things, right?
It's
so I'm
spring.
glad to hear you say totally.
It's spring. Yeah. It's like it's the what I mean. You and I are in totally different time zones, whatever. But like, if you were I'm sitting in my studio right now, but it's like a soft, like 45, 50 degrees and overcast right now. However, there's buds on the lilac bushes at my house. You know what I mean? And there's kind of there's melancholy surrounding everything, and yet, like, that life is coming. So I don't know. I just had to just go deep right there, but yeah.
Yeah, well, that's what we do, as you found out. Like that's what Ruthless is to me. Like it's it is that. There's there's like these moments where you're kind of going through this sort of like really so I'll give you a perfect example, and this is a song that really spoke to me, was Prophet. I'm almost positive it's Prophet, that where there is this like really kind of beautiful sweeping music, and then there's like this Beck Odelay breakdown, like at some point, this sort of like this thing that feels like, you know what I'm saying, thing that feels like it's coming from from like early Beck or something, and it fits it, but there's like an element of almost chaos that gets thrown in there, but the song itself is just like, I mean, lyrically, if you're gonna say something, well, damn it, Gabe, say something. But I don't feel like a prophet.
Yeah.
I feel more like a harlot. What?
Yeah.
Like, I
Yeah.
mean, oh my
Yeah.
God, dude. Such
Yeah.
a and just and speaking to me like in that particular song, speaking to me to that feeling right there that's captured.
Yeah.
Man,
Yep.
dude, do I feel that?
Yeah. I mean, I felt it too, obviously. Yeah. I mean, like, um, that song especially, like, this isn't like a political record, really. I would never describe it as that, and I wouldn't even necessarily describe that song as a political song, like at its core. But that song to me, like if I could give it a word, it's like exhaustion, exasperation. You know what I mean? Like with the the state of things of the world, of seeing so much chaos, so much like evil, honestly,
Yeah,
and so much pain and sorrow and division and stuff. Like,
yeah,
and like clearly seeing that. I mean, all of us feel that, all of us sense that. And yet I feel so completely powerless to do anything about that. And even like, and I don't know, like I think there's been different points in my life where I've felt like I feel like I have answers. Like, oh, these people are clearly in the wrong. And if we just did this, that would make everything better. You know what I mean? And sometimes I feel that way about some stuff, but man, in recent years, I have been finding myself feeling more and more at a loss as far as like solutions to stuff that I see going on. Um, and like not having a hard time like seeing like evil or problems or division or strife, but just like feeling exhausted with knowing like what to do about it. And what's funny is I feel like I don't think I've ever really had a whole lot of power to do anything
mm,
about it, but I think I thought that I at least had some like I took at least some amount of comfort in feeling like, oh well, if we just did this, you know what I mean, if people just started thinking this way or behaving this way, then you know what I mean, if we can just move in that direction. And lately I've been feeling even less sure of that, so that's a long-winded, I mean, the the lyrics say that more succinctly, but
yeah, well, but I'm so glad you went into such detail with it, because that's 100% the feeling that I feel.
yeah.
Everything you just said is exactly what I feel, and I think also for me, like, so yeah, to not last night, night before, Florida passed a almost complete abortion ban,
Right.
and then the governor signed it at like midnight, and the next day I walked into a 10th grade classroom to teach English. And
Mm,
right now, what we're working on, the unit we're working on, is making arguments. So we're talking about,
mm,
kind of, we were talking about issues of speech. Bodily autonomy is exactly what we just happen to be talking about. We're talking about vaccinations and mandatory vaccinations, and kids are making arguments. And so, I don't shy away from controversial topics, even though I'm in Florida,
totally.
and it's you do so at your own peril as a teacher, but like, I'm not
Yeah.
gonna quit being a good teacher, I'm not gonna,
Sure.
because the
Yeah.
law
Yeah.
says I can't, doesn't mean I'm not gonna. So anyway, like right away, a kid came up to me, a girl came up to me, and she's like, just had this look on her face of like, I need you, the adult, to tell me it's gonna be okay. And
Mm, mm,
she didn't say that. What she said was, she said, what do you think of, are we going to get a chance to talk about this abortion ban? And
mm,
she, but the look on her face very much communicated like, I need you to do something. And
mm,
I dude, I felt so hopeless. I was like,
mm,
I started crying. I was like, I don't,
Mm,
and I'm like, I just apologized to her. I didn't know what else to do. I'm like, I'm so sorry. And what I did was I opened up the floor for kids to talk for a few minutes, like if they needed to talk about anything. And they did, like it was very much on their minds. And another student brought it up, um, unrelated to the first student. But I just
mm-hmm,
stood there just like, and I said, just was honest with them. I was like, I wish I could tell you it's going to be okay, or like,
mm-hmm.
give you some kind of hope or something. But
Yeah,
the truth is I'm scared too. Like I don't know what to tell you
yeah,
other than that I'm scared. And that
mm-hmm,
feeling, and again, going back to the song, like that feeling is captured in the song because that's how I felt. I felt like I know this stuff inside and out. I majored in political science. I have a law degree. I read this stuff all the time. Like, no, I don't
yeah.
necessarily have answers, but I know my shit. And
Mm.
still, I was standing there just going, I don't know what to say to
I
you
got
right
nothing. I
now.
got nothing. Yeah, yeah, yeah. Man, that reminds me honestly of what you're just saying reminds me actually of like the very beginning of the pandemic, like March 2020, April 2020. My uh that feeling of like craving somebody to tell me that things are going to be okay. You know what
Hmm.
I mean? And like looking for the adult in the room, as it were.
Yeah.
And like I remember my mom and my dad and my sister were actually on were overseas. They were in Italy, like right as everything was getting crazy. And if you can remember, it feels like an eternity ago, but like Italy was kind of one of the first, like, well, it wasn't like one of the first places that really stuff started getting crazy, but it was like North Italy. All of a sudden stuff started breaking out there. And my parents were in southern Italy or something. My geography of Italy, my geography in general is terrible, but uh wherever is Vatican and Rome, is that southern Italy? Do you
It's
know?
so Rome is kind of in the middle. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, I studied
I'm
abroad in Rome. It's like
okay.
right in the middle. Yeah,
This
yeah.
is not crucial to the story at all. I'm sidetracking myself, but
That's all
anyway,
right.
they were at the Vatican with like 1,000 people, which if you've been to the Vatican, like a
Mhm.
thousand people is like
Yeah.
nothing, whatever.
Yeah.
But like the whole place was starting to clear out. But they like basically caught like the last flight out of Europe, more or less.
Wow.
And it was really dicey for a while. I wasn't sure if they were going to make it back, and everything was just crazy at that time. And I remember my parents landed and I called my dad, and he like put me on speakerphone with my mom and my dad and my sister, and they were like not like freaked out or anything like that. They were just like, oh wow, this is crazy, like we got to get home, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like I don't know if we're gonna be able to get home, but so they just get on the phone. My dad's just like really calm and was just like, oh yeah, we're back, we're driving home. And like while he was like just talking about just like their travel stuff, like I just like was completely bawling on the other side of the phone, and he didn't even know it. And then he said something, and I was like, I like tried to respond, and I was like, and then all of a sudden they're all crying or whatever. And I in that moment, like I felt like I really needed my dad. It's like I'm an adult, but I needed to just like hear from my dad that like he's okay, that things are gonna be okay.
Yeah.
Um, and it was weird. Like, I mean, my dad is is my hero, you know. And it was funny the way that he comforted me. It was just like, we don't know what's gonna happen. You know what I mean? I'm not gonna lie to you about that, but like, and yet still things are gonna be okay. And even in the not knowing, and I drew a lot of comfort from that, especially in the early stages of the pandemic when there were no adults in the room. Everybody was guessing, and nobody knew what was going on, man. But yeah, yeah.
Yeah, I think that like yeah. Looking at the adults in the room question, I mean, especially because that's one of the things that in this the whole spirit of what we've been discussing
Mm.
that I've been struggling with is like I'm at that stage where I'm supposed to be the adult in the room. Like I'm at
Yeah,
that age, right?
yeah,
Like
totally. Yeah, I just had my first kid, my daughter. She just turned one just like a week
oh,
ago.
fun, nice.
And yeah, yeah, but that has been like a thing that I've been realizing so much just the first year of having a kid is I thought that I would know like that I would be much more sure of myself. Like, like when you're a kid and you think about your dad and you're like, oh, my dad, he's got it. He knows what's going on. Like, oh,
Yeah.
my dad will take care of me. And now I'm in that position. And I'm like, what are we doing? I'm supposed to know what's going on here, and I'm making it up every day. I
Yeah.
am making it up.
That's funny, man. Well, I think
Yeah, man.
the thing I've come to grips with, and I'm only speaking for me here, but
Yeah, yeah.
the adults in my life when I was a kid, and especially the men, just had almost no self-awareness. And so
Mm,
their confidence really came from a place of like almost arrogance, like,
mm.
and so I look back on some of those people and I go like, that guy was my hero. Like I looked up
Oh,
to that
sure.
guy,
Yeah,
now with the benefit of hindsight, I look back and I'm like, that guy kind of sucks, he's sort of,
yeah,
he's
yeah,
a little bigoted and like he's not very nice and
yeah, yeah,
he's
yeah.
not kind to
Not
the kittens and birds, like
not the role model that you previously looked at him to. Yeah,
exactly. So that's kind of disorienting. So that as you try to shape whatever adult you want to be, trying
yeah,
to kind of like go, well, I don't want to be like that guy.
yeah.
That's not how I want to be. So it is
Hmm.
instructive in that way, but it's still like kind of disorienting because we do need we all need somebody to tell us it's going to be okay, right?
Yeah.
We all need
There's
that.
there's a deep crave in the soul, I think, for for somebody else to
Mhm.
take care of us, to tell us that we're going to be okay. I think there's like this perpetual childlikeness that I think
Yeah.
never goes away in any of us, no matter how old we get. That I think I don't know, like, yeah, I don't know. I think I would just describe it as that seems apparent to me, that maybe as we get older we get better at hiding that, or get better at
Mm,
faking that that's not in there somewhere. But I think, honestly, I think that things like a global pandemic and political chaos and stuff have been so brutal and so hard on us as a culture. But in a weird way, I think there's something that has been, like, probably like really healthy through hardship, that I think some illusions of security have gone away,
mm,
and illusions of control have gone
mm,
away. And even though that's been like really hard, it's certainly shaken me. I think it's shaken everybody in a lot of ways. I think it's healthy to actually, this sounds like a stupid sentence. I think it's healthy for us to face reality. Like, you know
uh-huh.
what I mean?
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Like, that, like, we're not in control in the ways that we think we are. In fact, we're like barely in control, if at all.
Mm,
Um, and that we can pretend that, like, our economy will keep us safe, that our military will keep us safe, that our country will keep us safe, that our political leaders will keep us safe, whatever. And I think it's probably a healthy thing for us to go through as a country, as a world, whatever, to, like, just realize, like, oh, like, these systems are only as strong as they are, and apparently that's not very strong. You know what I
yeah,
mean? That
yeah.
a virus can just come through and completely pull down the economy, can completely pull down all of our systems, that can disrupt everything. You know what I mean? And so, um, that could happen again next year. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And I mean, I think it's healthy to not, like, move through your day at all times just living paralyzed by fear. But
Mhm.
um, I don't know. I think that I think throughout a lot of human history, people have lived with an awareness, a greater awareness of their lack of control over their surroundings and their life. And I think modern people have, in some ways, enjoyed a time of illusion. You know what I mean? The comforts
Mhm.
of illusion that we have in our modernity have solved uh, things that used to cause chaos in the world.
Mhm.
Um, and I think we've been learning that that was not true.
Well, man, and what you just said there, one of the first things you said was you were talking about the idea that like maybe we as we get older get better at sort of hiding things. And
Yeah,
I think that then you went on to talk about how sort of the veil's been lifted quite a bit on
yeah,
sort of
yeah,
illusions of security. And I find that kind of hopeful too, what you just said, because
Hmm.
ultimately, and when we're making stuff, this is true, right? Ultimately, we want to get to the most authentic version of the truth. We want to get to
Yeah.
the most authentic version of ourselves in that work that we're doing, that creative work. And if the veil has been lifted, it's a lot easier to get there. We don't have to,
Hmm.
we don't have to push to, I don't know. I feel much more comfortable. I've always been pretty comfortable sharing my emotions. I feel
Hmm.
way more comfortable now in the last 3 years just being totally vulnerable than I did
Yeah. Yeah.
before, you know?
Yeah. Yeah. Man, I mean, again, this sounds like a stupid, like, duh sentence or whatever, but like, doesn't like just the truth feels good, even if
Yeah.
it's hard. You know what
Yeah.
I mean?
Hmm.
Like, um, and yeah, I sometimes I think, even if the truth is hard, like I don't know, like, trying to think of like a good example of this, but I don't know, maybe like when you're a kid and your parent, you're lying to your parent about something. Your parent asks you something and you lie. You're afraid you're going to get in trouble.
Yeah.
Like that feeling of now there's a disconnect between me and this person, and I'm trying to like hold up this falseness or whatever. That when your parent finally is like, what? This is not adding up. Wait, are you lying to me? And then you're like, yes, yes, I'm lying. And then you just like face the punishment that's going to come. But like the
Hmm.
relief that comes of like, oh, we're now living in the truth together. And
Yeah.
like, yeah, I'm going to have to go to my room and I can't play with my friends today. You know what I mean? But like, there's still like a relief that comes from like living under the truth versus living under lies or living under illusions or even living under misunderstanding. You know what I mean? Like,
Yeah.
um, it's yeah, facing the hardships of whatever the truth may bring, I think at the end of the day is always better than living under a lie or living under illusion. But I mean, it doesn't make the hardness of it go away, but it is better. It is better.
Right.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Let's dive into the process of making this beautiful record.
Yeah.
So unconventional in a lot of ways. It seems like you took you a while, and
Yeah, too long, man.
you're in your
Nobody should
studio
work on
right.
a record for yeah, nobody should work on a record for 5 years. That's silly. That's
But
really silly.
well, I'm glad you did, and I'm glad you stuck with it, and that all. I mean, that shows a lot of perseverance, to stick with it that long. I mean, you could have given up.
Yeah,
That is a long time to
thought
work
about
on a project. Yeah, I bet. Well, let's talk about that. Let's talk about that.
it.
Like, so you in the process of this, you built the studio.
Yeah.
You were working in various jobs making this whole thing happen. Can you talk about
Yeah.
like the lead up to making this record, or the process of making this record, and like why you didn't give up on it?
Yeah. Oh man. Great questions. Well, yeah. So, I put out the first piece of music that I put out under Waldemar was a EP. I think I put it out in like 2017, early January 2017. I think sounds right. I think it was 2016. Doesn't matter. Somewhere around then.
Mhm.
And and uh, pretty immediately wanted to start working on a fuller body of work on a full record. And so yeah, after we like played some shows around that EP and kind of let that EP run its course, and then I pretty much jumped right into writing really intentionally and intensely for
Yeah.
this record, and did probably about a solid year of writing. I think this is between like 20 sometime in 2017 for about a year into 2018, and during that time I was driving school bus at the time, which was just like such a like it was probably one of the most like creatively I want to say fertile. That feels like not the right word, but kind of like maybe not. Let's reach for a different word. I don't know. Like it was very generative. Oh my
Oh,
gosh.
there's just no way to do it.
There's no way. I'm
Yeah,
sorry. Reel
yeah,
that back in. Yeah,
yeah.
we'll edit that in post. Just kidding.
Oh, yeah,
Um,
I gotta let that one roll, Gabe.
yeah, it's fine. That's fine. I'll let it ride. But yeah, like because it was just such a regimented time of my life where I was up
Hmm.
at like 5:15, 5:30 in the morning,
Okay.
like like cup of coffee, out the door, race to the bus station, go pick up the kids, drop them off at school, and then I'd be home by like 9 or 9:30. Coffee, eggs, and then I'd head to my a little bedroom studio setup because I didn't have the studio yet, and I had like a 4 hour chunk, which was just like perfect because it was like enough time where you could actually get something done, but it was short enough that like you had to move, which like those kind of constraints was just like perfect. And the house was empty. My wife was off at work and stuff. And I just got so much writing done. And
Wow.
so like in the mornings when I'd be dropping the kids off, I'd be kind of like thinking about what song I'd like where I'd left it off the day before. And then I would bounce a mix at in the afternoon, put it on my phone, race back to the bus station, and listen to whatever my mixes were the entire way to the bus station. Then go pick up the kids from school, drop them off at the house, and kind of the entire time I'm driving, I'm still just kind of like in the background of my brain, just kind of like percolating on the
Wow.
melodies and arrangements and stuff like that. So it was kind of like my John Prine time, I guess, of like when he was like a mailman delivery guy. That was my version of that, I guess, was driving bus, working on these songs. But yeah, so after about a year of that, I thought keyword is thought that I had a record that was ready to get recorded,
Mhm.
and uh called up my buddy Brian, who's a insane heavy lifter producer in Eau Claire. He's produced a ton of great records. And we were gonna do the next Wally record together at his place and set some dates on the calendar. And then all of a sudden he calls me up and we go out for breakfast at the VFW and he was like, "Hey, I just got a job with the War on Drugs to go on tour as their sound guy, and so I'm gonna take it. I gotta clear my calendar, including your record." And which was like the most like crazy bittersweet thing
Yeah.
ever because like the War on
Yeah.
Drugs is like one of my favorite bands ever, and
Right.
Brian's such a good buddy. It was just like so stoked for him, and at the same time, I was like devastated, like
Hmm.
so like so devastated. Like he's just such a at the time was just like I think dealing with some like pretty significant artistic insecurities of feeling like I really needed my feeling at the time was I really needed Brian to the language I would use to rescue me from making a bad record, you know, that like okay, I would bring him these like songs and he would make sure that they actually end up good. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Yeah.
And but so yeah, I kind of went through a little tough season of kind of now what after that, but yeah, I was sitting on a little pile of money that I was planning on paying Brian to make the record, and my brother Nick and we just kind of got this wild hair where we're like, what if we turned that old horse barn at your house into a studio, which had always kind of been a pipe dream. My brother Nick and we've worked at other people's recording studios over the years, and having our own place to work uh, sounded sounded like, oh, that would be great. You know, like winning the lottery, that would be sweet if we had a place of our own. You know,
Hmm.
and it was one of those perfect scenarios where we like knew just enough to feel like we could do it but not enough to actually know what we were getting ourselves into. And because if we would have known exactly what we were getting ourselves into, I don't think we would have started, you know.
Oh, wow.
It was one of those things. So yeah, we decided to build a studio, and the building itself, yeah, like I said, my house was built in the 1890s, and there was this old horse barn at the house, um, and it was barely hanging on.
Yeah.
I always tell people it probably would have saved us time and money if we would have just dozed the whole thing and started over. But you can't do that to 1890s
Uh-uh.
buildings, man. That's
Uh-uh.
you
Yeah.
don't do
Yeah.
that.
Yeah.
But yeah, it took us 2 years to build the studio. And and in that time, I wasn't really super actively working on the songs, which in hindsight now I think was really good for my mind to just kind of take a break from the songs a little bit. Um, and I think they grew without me working on them. You know what I mean? Over that time of
Uh,
just building the studio, I think they kind of had time to mature in, and I don't know exactly how to describe it other than that, because that doesn't really make sense. But for some reason that feels right to me. But yeah, but then after we finished building the studio, and the whole time of building the studio, I thought that we were going to be done building the studio like next month for like 24 months straight. It was like I didn't I at no point did I ever like dawn on me like, oh, maybe this is going to take a lot longer than you than you think. It
Yeah,
was like
yeah.
every single month it was like okay, we just got to hang this drywall and mud it, and then we just got to hang a few lights, and then like we're good to go. We should have that done in like 4 weeks. And then like 2 weeks later, clearly realizing that's not going to happen, getting like super dejected, going through this like emotional swing of like, oh, this is never going to get done, and then kind of dusting myself off and like, okay, new goals. If we can just do this and this and this, 4 weeks, it'll be done. And it was like that,
Yeah.
copy paste for like 24 months. It was so stupid. But and I still didn't learn the lesson, because then after we finally finished the studio, I was like, okay, great. We're going to get in the studio and we're going to record this record. It'll take us a month to track it, month to mix it. We'll have it out by December. And it took us
Yeah, yeah.
2 years of about like, yeah, probably about a year and a half of recording and about a half a year of mixing and stuff. And it was such a long haul, man. Honestly,
Man.
I get, again, like if I would have known exactly what we were getting ourselves into, like I don't, man, I don't know if I would have kept going, honestly. Like it was the thinking that I was running a sprint, but that I I thought I was running a sprint for a marathon. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
Like
yeah.
if I would have known that I was signing up for a marathon, I think I would have, screw that. I don't know what I'm gonna do. I guess
Well,
I'm just gonna be sad
I mean,
and quit.
but that's such a great illustration of what we're capable of when we don't allow our anxieties and our insecurities to get in the way.
Yeah.
There's a place for that, but at the same time, when we're capable of so much more and we're so much better than we realize we are, creatively
Mm-hmm.
or otherwise, and when you're not trying to face that marathon, when you're not thinking about it in that way, and you're just in there doing
Yeah.
the work, you were doing the work every day. And so
Yeah,
whether
for sure.
that was the building of the studio or that was the writing of the songs, you were in there doing the work every day, and that's how you get this beautiful piece of art. That's
Yeah.
amazing, man. I'm really
Yeah.
interested in the school bus thing because, as a teacher and as someone who's around kids all
Yeah.
day, um, one of the things that I struggle with during the school year when I'm in the classroom. So I've been like in and out of the classroom for 14 years now, and
Mm-hmm.
this year I'm back in full time in the classroom for the remainder
Sweet.
of this year. Yeah, and it's great. Like I love my work, but
Mm-hmm.
at the end of the day, I'm exhausted, and I don't have a whole lot of energy for much of anything, especially writing or doing creative work. I
Mm-hmm.
did the other day. It was awesome, but the only reason I was able to do it is because my partner is an artist and she was doing something, and I was like, I need to work on my damn novel. Like I really do. And
Yeah.
and she was doing it, and I was like almost falling asleep on the keyboard, doing it, but it took her energy to get me to that place, and
Yeah,
her.
you had to draft off of her or whatever. Yeah.
Exactly. I had to draft.
Yeah.
That's a great analogy. Yeah, I had to draft off of her. But like with the school bus thing, so a couple of things that interest me in that. One is for folks listening who don't know what school buses are like, it's a pretty tough job. Like you're
It's
you're
surprisingly tough. Yeah.
it's really tough. Like you're managing a group of kids while also making sure they get to A and B safely, and you're driving a
Yeah.
bus.
A
Um,
bus.
so like that's really challenging work. I mean, I've never actually driven the bus, but I've been on plenty of school buses, on plenty of field trips. And then we used to one time we were having trouble with the buses. So we each took shifts where we rode the
Mm.
buses before and after school. We rode the whole route, and
Yep.
like so that we could then as teachers be the ones that were managing the bus so the
Yeah.
driver could just drive. But
Yeah.
most of the time you don't have that luxury. You're doing both. And then at the end of that, I'm just interested in like whether or not you were in fact like after your morning shift exhausted, or drained after that work.
Yeah, yeah, it's so funny. Like driving school bus, you're constantly like, what's the most imminent danger? What's going on in the back of the bus, or what's happening right in front of the bus? You know what I mean? And
Yeah.
it's like sometimes you have to like let that kid like this sounds
Yeah.
terrible, but it's like I have to let that kid bully that other kid for 20 more seconds so that I can safely get through this intersection, and then I'm gonna pull over and I'm gonna put a stop to that. You know what I
Yep.
mean? Like,
Yep.
it's
It's so
such a
hard,
funny
man.
job.
People
It's
don't
such a funny
realize like
job.
it's
Yeah,
really hard work and
yeah,
it pays shit in most
it does.
places.
It does. It does. Yeah, yeah. Um, yeah. I think like I guess to answer your question, I felt very tired after getting home after dropping the kids off in the afternoon.
Okay.
Like I was pretty much tapped at that point. I'd been awake since like man, I think my routine is I was waking up at like 5 a.m.
Mm.
every day and was kind of going to bed like soft 8:30 9 p.m. or whatever was when I was tapping out or whatever. But by the time I was dropping the kids off in the afternoon, like I had been up early, driven school bus, and then I'd also like really spent myself creatively for like a really solid 4 or 5 hours in between them or whatever. And so there was kind of like a really good natural just like kind of closing up the shop at the end of the like I kind of like the songs would kind of percolate in my brain whilst doing all the stuff that you do as a school bus driver.
Mhm.
Um, but then it was kind of like a really nice natural time for me to like put the songs on the shelf a little bit and just spend time. Like that season, I remember just like it was like such a really awesome, healthy like rhythm. Like I'd get done driving the kids and get home, and I'd just like hang out with my wife, and we'd do dinner and maybe hang out with a friend, and then like I was just in bed early. You know what I mean? Like it was
Mm-hmm.
just Monday through Friday was just this like really like segmented, which sounds kind of like boring, but it actually felt so free in a lot of ways.
Yeah.
Like
Yeah.
it was
Yeah.
really regimented in a lot of ways, but I don't know, like there was this a time for everything in that
Mm-hmm.
season that was like so wonderful, you know. But no, when I got back in the morning to my house after dropping the kids off, I was like ready to go. Like I think I'd been awake for
Mm.
like 3 hours at the time. I had like I had I'd squashed some fights, you know, in the
Yeah.
back of the
Yeah.
bus.
Yeah.
Like I had gotten the kids there safely and whatever, and then got home, ate breakfast, like got some food in me, coffee, and was like I was just like I was on, you know.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, Afternoon is a different story, though. I was collapsing.
Well, I think also the second thing about that, so there's the challenge that I was curious about, and then and the exhaustion that can come with working around kids because you're in physical proximity to them, and
For
they're
sure.
giving off all kinds of energy, you know, and
Hmm.
each one of them is giving off different energy, and
Yep.
you know, if
Yep.
you're an empath at all, you're absorbing some of that, and then you know, it's like it's really difficult to then go and be a human afterward. And so
Yeah,
I was
totally.
interested in that, but I'm also interested in one of the things I'm constantly searching for, especially in the summers, since I have
Hmm.
summers off, is constantly searching for those constraints that you just described. You
Yeah, yeah,
had
yeah.
that block of time, you had to do the work during that time, or it wasn't going to get done.
Totally. Yep.
And you had these ideas that you had to get out. And
Hmm.
so it's great that did you know that, like when you took on that job as a bus driver, were you like, oh,
Hmm.
this is awesome because I'm going to do this because then it'll force me to create during this time.
Yeah, actually, completely. Ever since I've been like writing songs sort of since I was like 10, kind
Mm,
of. And when I say writing songs, I've always been writing lyrics. I
mm,
didn't actually get an instrument that you could write songs to. That didn't enter the picture until like my freshman year of college, basically.
okay.
But yeah, when I was in college was when I really caught the bug for, oh, I want to do music. I want to write songs. Like this is what I want to do. And since then, every single job that I've ever taken has been taken with the consideration of, is this going to further or hinder my pursuits of writing songs
Wow.
and doing band stuff. Um and so like I've literally I've counted it. I think I'm not exaggerating. I think I've worked for 40 different employers since I was like 18.
Wow.
And and I've managed to leave every single one of those on good terms, which
Yeah,
is
yeah.
I'm not gonna lie, is really impressive if you
It
think
is
about it,
impressive.
because that's averaging leaving a job like every 2 to 3 months.
Yeah.
Which, if you're an employer, that sucks. If you have
Yeah.
somebody and you train them and then they ditch you 3 months later.
Yeah.
But yeah, so the when I arrived at school bus driving, I'd heard from a buddy who worked at the bus station and who was also a creative, and I think he knew I was looking for a job, and also knew that I was looking for a job, a certain type of job that would give me enough money to be able to support myself and my wife, at least a little bit, and still allow me time to be creative and do that. And so I checked it out and was like, oh, this seems like this might be really great. And I was like really upfront with the company, like, hey, I'm a musician, and um, this is what I'm like. This job will be a good fit for me if this is the circumstance. Does that seem like something that like would work well with you guys? And they were like, oh yeah, that would be great. Like, they're just like the most wonderful, kind people. Like, you watch Parks and Rec,
Yeah.
they're like 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 the accounting firm,
Uh-huh.
like, and they were like that with
Yeah.
me. They were just like ridiculously kind and ridiculously accommodating, and like so excited to like have somebody. I think they were like excited to have like a creative in the building or something like that. I don't know. I always got that vibe of like, oh, Gabe is a
We got a
songwriter
rock
and is
star.
yeah,
Rock star
he's
bus
like
driver.
he's doing this to support his dreams of being a
That's
songwriter. You
great.
know what I mean?
Oh my God, that's great.
So
Gabe,
yeah.
this free version of Zoom is about to end, but I'm having so much fun. Do you have more time? Can we just restart this link?
I've got a very free morning, dude. As much
Okay.
time as you want, man. Yeah, yeah,
Awesome.
absolutely.
Yeah, so I'm just gonna end this and then we'll just hit the same link. I'll just start the meeting over.
Killer.
Awesome.
See you in a
All
sec.
right. Cool. All right. Perfect. We're gonna add you to the Zoom Hall of Fame. Some folks come back on it. It takes
Yeah.
them forever, right? I'm sitting there waiting. Not Gabe. Gabe's right back, baby.
I'm
Right
here.
away.
I'm here. And we're back.
Gabe's used to that bus driving schedule. He's
Exactly. Let's go.
You gotta get there.
Totally.
Dude. Okay, so a couple of things I wanted to dive a little bit more into the record, because one of the things that
Yeah.
I noticed is what I would recognize as sort of spiritual or almost religious imagery. Is are you like a spiritual and or religious person?
Yeah, 100%.
Okay, and can you talk a little bit about that, like what that means to you?
Yeah, well, I grew up in the church. My dad is a pastor.
Oh, wow, okay.
So I've been in and around that for my entire life. And yeah, and definitely 100% still a person of faith. And in fact, this record, in a lot of ways, that's kind of one of the through lines, I would say, of this record is this record kind of chronicles a time of like extreme doubt, I would
Yeah.
say. I I don't know how close I was to really completely walking away from belief in God. But it was, I didn't know what was gonna happen, I guess. Was like a I guess kind of a buzzword around this sort of thing in modern times that I don't know if it really applies or not, but like deconstruction is a term that I think a lot of people would apply to this sort of thing of like, you grew up being taught things about the nature of the world, about God, about um, faith and theology and stuff. And just like all of us as kids, we just accept the things that we're taught to believe. And um, around the time that I was like writing this record, really kind of leading up into when I started writing this record, it's kind of like one by one, certain things like didn't really make sense to me, or all it was more so like all of a sudden I was like, oh, I've like believed this like my whole life, but I don't know why I believe that actually. Like I I I I I would say if somebody asked me like, oh, I believe this, but if they asked a simple follow-up question like, oh, why do you believe that?
Yeah.
I'd be like, I didn't think you were gonna I didn't think you were gonna ask me that. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And man, whether you're a person of faith or not a person of faith, our understanding of the world is like 100% like a tapestry, and you start pulling on one thread, and like you start pulling on one thing, you will find it is interconnected with so many different things. You know, that if you start rethinking what you believe about, trying to think of a good example, I don't know, politics, you will find politics is connected to all sorts of other parts of your life. And if
Yep.
you start questioning that aspect, it inherently will cause you to question so many other things. And then you just start chasing that, and it just has this domino effect of all of a sudden, like the floor goes out from underneath you and everything just feels like it's in question, and it's just free fall, man.
Yeah.
Um and that was really the season that I found myself in, of like, I don't know if there's a God. I don't know what he's like. I don't know what my purpose is, or if there is purpose. All the, like, just everything felt in question, which is so, like, I mean, we were talking about profit, like, is so exhausting. Like trying
Yeah.
to like you're just grasping for anything that feels firm, that like, oh, I can hang my hat on this. This is true, and start from with that. You know what I mean? I had very little. I think honestly, all that I think that thing that I found that felt like this is solid is, I was like, I do believe that there's something beyond us,
Mm.
that there is a higher power, and that the nature of that higher power is love,
Mm-hmm.
and it is goodness. And I don't have many answers beyond that. I don't understand why there is a God who is good and is love, and why there is so much evil all around me. I don't know why. Like I don't know why, but at the end of the day, I believe that this craving for love and for goodness that we all have, that comes from outside of us, that comes from, that's originating from somewhere else. You know what I mean? And
Mm.
that was like basically that was like all I had. and
Yeah.
and that weirdly, so like that, the like a major theme in this record is trust. And
Mm.
like sometimes trust uh is not in much, you know what I mean? But
Yeah.
it's I mean, trust in a way is inherent in trust is not knowing. You know what I mean? If you
Yeah.
knew, it wouldn't be trust, it would just be knowledge. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
um so maybe that was more than you bargained for, but yeah.
No, it's what
Yeah,
I
yeah.
wanted. I'm glad. You started out kind of like, I was like, am I gonna get him to go there? And you went there.
I went there, yeah, dude. Totally, yeah. Yeah.
Because those are the questions I wrestle with, Gabe. And like, for me, you said something that really you said a couple of things that really resonated with me. One of them is when in talking about profit and how exhausting it is to live in a space of asking these questions. And
Yeah.
I live in a perpetual state of asking these questions.
Mhm, mhm,
From having grown up in the church and lost my faith at a very young age,
mhm.
and really, really struggling with uh existence and
Yeah.
what the purpose is. And the older I get, the worse it gets. I don't feel more
Mm,
comfort as I get older with that.
mm,
It's becoming more difficult for me because I feel the end of my life in you know much more it's much more present than it was, say, 10 or
yeah,
15 years ago.
yeah,
I'm feeling the pull of the physical breakdown of my body, starting to get
yep,
to that
yep,
point where like
yep,
a 15-minute run is a lot right now. And
yeah, yeah,
and it wasn't 5 years ago. It was I
yeah.
was running a marathon 3 years ago, and
Funny how
so
time slips away, isn't it?
it's
Yeah,
amazing.
yeah, yeah.
And but the thing that gives me some hope is what you said, and I liked how you framed the fact that you were looking for something to hold on to, and the thing that you were able to hold on to was really kind of a vague, nebulous thing to some extent, right? And
A
that
little
is this existence of
bit.
something outside of you. But I find it comforting that that's how you process it, because I think I'm in a similar place in terms of the love part, right? Like to me,
Mm, mm,
whatever that God thing is, whatever that sort of higher power is, the place that it's manifests for me, or the way that that it manifests for me, is in love. And I can
mm.
see that that's a tangible thing I can see and feel every day with the love that I feel for the people in my life and my dogs and all kinds of things.
Yeah, yeah. And it
And
feels more than just it. to call that just a chemical interaction in your brain that causes you to have a chemical reaction that we call an emotion of of and that we name that chemical reaction as love, but it isn't actually love. It's just a chemical reaction. Feels like, no, it
Yeah.
is more than that. You know, like I reject that this is just a chemical thing. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
That feels insufficient. Like I understand chemistry. I understand brain
Sure,
science.
sure, sure.
I get that, but that 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 feels like that is part of the answer, certainly, but is not the fullness of the answer. That there's something like bigger than just a chemical reaction that causes me to love my partner, for me to love the animals in my life, to love my friends. That there is something spiritual going on there that cannot be fully explained by um, somebody opening up my brain and looking at the levels of chemicals and dopamine and whatever. You
Yeah,
know what I
yeah, yeah.
mean?
Opening
Yeah.
up your brain, based on what I've heard from this record, opening up your brain and looking at the chemicals might be a pretty long process. There might
Yeah.
seems like there's a lot of
A little
chemicals
bit.
interacting up there.
Yeah, you might be a little bit afraid of what you find. Yeah.
What can you talk about the namesake of the band and the track itself that's named after Waldemar?
Yeah, 100%. So yeah, namesake of the band is my grandpa Wally, my dad's dad. Uh, he was a farmer in Minnesota his whole life.
Hmm.
I think he was a second generation American. I'm pretty sure it was his parents, not his grandparents, who were first generation fresh off the boat from Norway.
Hmm.
And yeah, at the farmhouse it's still an active cattle farm. My cousins are running it now. They just took it over from my uncle.
Oh, cool.
But yeah, my grandpa Wally, yeah, he was like, I think he was like a teenager during the Great Depression. His brothers went and fought in World War II, and he was, I think, I don't know how the draft worked back then, but I think in a lot of cases, farming communities, they let one sibling stay home to like kind of take care of the farm, and the rest of the brothers would get drafted and go off to war. And so he was the one that stayed home. Um, 99% sure of that history. If my dad is listening, he might call me and fact check me, but I'm 99% sure that's right. So,
Yeah.
yeah, but yeah, he was like the first like he was a pretty quiet. He was a very quiet man, and was the first like kind of tangible understanding that I had of what depression looked like for a person. And he was like a teen during the Great Depression, and I think that had, from what I understand, that had a really big effect on him. And I think, um, and he came and lived with us for the last few years of his life. He had dementia and stuff, but I remember as a little kid, like my whole family's very gregarious, loud, big emotions or whatever. And in the midst of that was my grandpa Wally, who's very quiet, reserved, not very extreme emotions, wouldn't say a whole lot, whatever. And I remember as like a little kid, like kind of asking my dad, I don't know how I would have phrased it, but like, why is Grandpa Wally the way that he is?
Hmm.
And my dad, I don't know how my dad explained it to me, but I remember him being like, oh, like he struggles with depression, you know, and explained to me kind of what that is. And I think the way that my probably 6-year-old brain took it in is like, okay, sometimes adults are sad, and
Yeah.
not because something just happened to them. They're just sad. Why are they sad? I don't understand this, but whatever. He was like the first kind of like, uh, uh, my early understanding of what depression looked like in a person. And depression like really runs in my family. My dad has struggled with it, and then I found myself struggling with it like very deeply, coming out of college. The band that I started in college, when I, like I said, when I really caught the bug for songwriting, we all moved into a house together, and then things just weren't working out. We had like 5 songwriters in one band, which is a disaster. It's not gonna work.
Uh-huh.
And so we decided to end the band, but we're all still living together, which like felt like living in a house with your ex-girlfriend or something like that. Like
Yeah.
they're all like in their room like writing new songs, and I'm in my room doing nothing. And they were all still in school at the time. I was the only one who was graduated, and so I was just like, I was working on a painting crew and doing nothing. And I was just, all the dream that I had of doing the band thing all of a sudden felt dead in the water, and I didn't have enough confidence in myself as a songwriter. I really felt like, oh, I got lucky that I had assembled a crew of really good musicians and I'm not a good musician. And that's what I was dealing with. And eventually, like, I couldn't work on music for like 3 or 4 months, man. And finally, I just was like, I need to just write a song, just just write a song. Like, I just need to get something out. And I
Mm.
like went into my bedroom basically at this house, and what came out was the song Waldemar. And I was wrestling with my own depression through the lens of my grandpa Wally. And man, I finished that song, and it happened. That song like really just kind of spilled out pretty fast. It didn't. I don't remember that one taking a long time to figure that one out. And I just kind of looked at that song and was just like, this is a good song. Like, I think I still want to do this. Like, I think I've got something to share, and maybe I don't actually need those other guys in the band to be able to keep doing this. And I don't know, I didn't think about it at all. I was just like, oh, I'm calling this band Waldemar. Like, that's like what I'm gonna
Wow.
go by, this family name. It feels like it describes this work and whatever. But yeah, man, that little it's a lot of times, like, the songs that have been around for a long time, you hear songwriters looking back at works that they made 8 or 9 years ago, and they're like, I don't know if I like that song very much anymore. And that song, every time I sing it, every time I play it, it still feels as fresh as when I wrote it, honestly. Like, which I feel really grateful for it. That song feels like it saved me a little bit. Um,
Wow.
so, but yeah, I could have put it on that first EP that I did as Waldemar. But for some reason, that song felt like it belonged in a larger body of work. So I've been kind of just sitting on that one, waiting to put that on like the full record. And so this was it. This was its time to
Man, that's
to
great. It's
happen.
a
So,
beautiful song. I mean, this record top to bottom is beautiful. There's
mm.
not a miss on it. It's absolutely
Oh, sick.
yeah, I mean,
Thank you.
the writing is incredible. The sort of the freshness of it. I mean, you mentioned War on Drugs earlier, and that influence is
Hmm.
quite obvious on this record.
Totally,
But
totally.
it's not like you're doing a it's not like you're just ripping off War on Drugs or something, right? It's just that there
Yeah,
is
yeah.
that essence to it that is hard to explain, because like how do you explain War on Drugs to people, right? I don't know like what that
I
is.
don't know, man.
I know it moves me. And
Freaking
like,
good. Yeah,
yeah,
it's
I know it
really
moves
good.
me in real big ways, but I
Yep,
don't know
yep.
how to explain it. And I think the essence of that is very true on Ruthless. Like that
Mm,
essence of like, this thing really moves me on first listen. Like the first listen,
mm,
my first listen was, I was on spring break and I was driving to Tampa. I was going to go to some spring training games and then
mm.
interview somebody. And Bronson Arroyo, that was our most recent
Sick.
episode.
Yeah, dude.
Yeah, it was so much fun, dude. It
Yeah,
was,
dude.
God, I can't say enough about how cool that experience
Yeah, that's a
was.
killer interview, man. That's a good
Yeah,
get.
yeah. And then I was on my way there, so I pop your record in, and I was like, oh yeah,
Mm,
this has got me, like right off the bat, this has
killer.
got me, right.
Right.
But then the thing that it rewards repeated listens, because I
Mm,
think um the because the music is so unique that on my first listen I was lost in the music, and then on
mm.
my second and third and fourth, and then now I'm on my whatever listen,
Yeah.
the songwriting comes through, the lyrics come through
Mm,
for me,
mm,
right? So the first listen was like, oh, this is fresh, this is interesting.
mm.
There's like elements of all these different things that I love, right?
Yeah,
There's these
sweet.
elements of all these kind of things that speak to me musically, and then
Mm, mm,
the repeated listens reward just how lyrically rich it is, and how much I told you before, how much I needed this record. And
mm,
so it really is just absolutely outstanding, man.
mm.
And I'm just grateful for it, and I'm grateful for the
That
work you
makes
do.
me really happy to hear that, dude. Like,
And
I went the entire time I was making it, like, I was the repeated listens thing, that makes me really happy to hear that. I feel like a lot of times as songwriters, I think we're kind of chasing. I don't know. We're trying to make the record we want to hear to some degree. I don't
mm,
know if we necessarily think of it in those terms necessarily, but I think if you're writing songs honestly, that's, I think, in some to some degree what you're trying to do.
yeah.
And a lot of my favorite 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 records are the ones where the rewards are richest in the repeated listens, you know.
Mm-hmm.
I love subtleties in the mix. Like I love when you can come back to a song and keep noticing little details around every corner, like, or even like a lyric all of a sudden blossoms to you in some way, or that it takes 10 listens to hear the way that songs on a record reference each other, like stuff like that. You never notice that on the first listen unless it's like painfully obvious or whatever. Um, but that was because I love records that are like that so much. Honestly, part of what I feel like took so long in making this record was I spent so much time uh, putting in little details, and even in the mixing details in really subtly. And I think in some ways I don't have the language for it while I was doing this, but I think to some degree I was putting in detail that was for a listener, like almost like a specific gift for a listener who's like me, you know, like this little detail nobody's going to hear until they've listened to this record like 20 times. You know what I mean? And
Yeah.
maybe nobody ever will listen to the record 20 times, and that's okay, but this little detail literally nobody's going to hear it unless you like are really, your head gets really deep inside this song. And so this is like so many of my favorite records feel like they have those little gifts of like, oh, they like put that little thing
Yeah.
in there. Like that was an intentional act.
Yeah.
And like that's not like, you're not going to hear that on the radio, you're not going to hear that on whatever. Like that feels like that was for me. Like for like, I am deep into this record. This record means so much to me. This feels like a personal little, here you go, Gabe. You know?
Yeah.
And I feel like I think that was kind of on my mind a little bit, not in exactly that language or whatever, but like I was very aware of a lot of the stuff that I was layering in there, that in the back of my brain, there's this like constant conflict of like, bro, nobody's gonna hear this thing that you're putting in. Like, this is so far back in the mix. There's other stuff that's sandwiched around it. Like, nobody's gonna hear this, you know.
Yeah.
But I don't know. I couldn't help myself, honestly. It's just like I
Yeah.
don't know. It's just like what I had to do. So
Well, I think that
yeah.
okay, that makes a ton of sense to me, and that I think contributes to its re-listenability. I mean, that
Mm,
contributes to the fact that it's been there've been lately, and I think I don't think I've processed it quite like this until now that we're having this conversation, but
mm,
there have been records, because I'm going through such a difficult season in my life. There have
yeah.
been records that I need as comfort records.
Yeah.
I need
Yeah,
to
dude.
feel like, you know what I'm saying? Like I need that Pony Bradshaw's North Georgia Rounder is one that has
Mm,
been a constant companion. I had got an advanced
mm,
listen to it and it came out in January, but I've been listening to it since November of last
mm-hmm.
year. And it was like my companion through some really fucking heavy stuff.
Oh man.
And then this record, life's not quite as heavy now as it was a couple months ago for me, but it's still like just taking jab after jab.
Mm,
And this record has been my constant companion, and it has been I'm
mm,
in the car and I'm like, what am I going to go to? Boom,
mm-hmm.
I got Ruthless on there. Like that has
Oh,
been,
sweet.
yeah, I don't think I processed it like that until just now as you were saying that, but I think
Mm-hmm.
the amount of detail you put into it and the amount of effort that went into making this record contributes to its re-listenability in that way.
Mm, mm.
Yeah.
Man, that makes me so happy to hear that, dude. That it's like it's cool to like go back, like so many memories of being bleary eyed at 3 or 4 in the morning, adding in little things and questioning whether or not that would end up being actually meaningful for somebody. It's like fun. It's fun to be like, oh, that was for Jason. You know what I
Yeah,
mean?
yeah, yeah,
Like,
yeah, yeah.
and maybe there will be somebody else besides you as well. And if that's true, like I'm super grateful for that. But that's really rewarding for me to hear that, man. So thank you for telling me
Awesome.
that.
Yeah, for sure. Are you gonna tour this thing at all?
Yeah, yeah. In fact, we're kicking off like our record release touring here on May 6th. We're starting with the hometown record release show in Eau Claire, and then we're doing uh, a solid run through the Midwest circuit, if you will.
Uh-huh.
In May, we're playing Minneapolis, Chicago, Milwaukee, Madison, uh, Dubuque, Iowa, a couple other. I'm blanking on
Cool.
the rest of our tour dates in May, but yeah, and then we're starting booking some other stuff that's further out from Midwest. My hope is for us to get out to East Coast later this year, maybe West Coast early next year. But I don't know. Like we've never toured out east, we've never toured out west, and so
Mhm.
getting people who, you know, reaching out to talent buyers and stuff who have never heard of you and you have zero tour history, you know, we'll see what
Yeah.
happens. But
Yeah.
or zero tour history in those markets or whatever. But
Right.
I don't know. We'll see. But yeah, I'm hoping that we're gonna pound the pavement a lot over the next year. I'd like to go hit pretty much every major region of the United States over the next like year or two. So
Oh,
um,
great. Good.
that's the hope. We'll see what actually happens. But yeah,
Yeah,
man.
great. Well, I hope it lines up where I get to catch out on the road. That would be awesome to
Yeah,
see
because
you
you're in
guys live.
Florida, right? Yeah, you
Yeah.
said you're in Florida. Yeah,
Yeah.
dude, I would love to. Yeah, I've only been to Florida once, and it was on a family trip, and we did like the classic Disney thing, and
Okay.
had a really rad time. Wait, no, I've been to Florida twice. It doesn't matter.
Okay.
Whatever. Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
well, I mean, we love good music here. So like I think people sometimes overlook Florida and think for good reason. I mean, we're a joke in a lot of ways. Like we're a punchline in a lot of ways. But I do think that when artists, so I mean, I had Mike Harmeyer from Mike and the Moon Pies on a little while
Mm,
ago, and he one of the things that's happened with Mike and the Moon Pies is like, they're kind of like known as the Texas Oklahoma circuit kind of band, but then
okay, cool.
they've started to get out, quite a bit more in recent years, and they are beloved in Florida. They sell out all over Florida.
Heck
And
yeah.
and like I was talking to him about that and the rest of the band about it. They were surprised. They didn't realize how much of an appetite there is here for live music.
Mm.
And I understand why to some extent people think that we're just always at the beach all the time or whatever, but we have
PCB.
yeah, exactly. Spring break. But
Spring break.
but we have really great rock clubs here. Orlando is
Yeah,
like full of great rock clubs.
sick.
And I don't think most folks know that. I mean, folks who listen to this show know that because I'm constantly harping on it. But I
Right.
think generally speaking, people don't realize that there's just a lot of cool venues here, and there's an appetite
Mm.
for music here. And it may not be in Austin or even a Minneapolis, as you mentioned earlier, that you're going to be
Yeah, yeah,
playing, but it's it's a place where we love live music. So hopefully you're able to make it down here. But regardless, I'm just
yeah.
so stoked, man. I've like gotten lost in this conversation and forgot to ask all my like normal questions. So we usually end on what you're getting down on. Then that's the
Sure.
art that has you inspired at the moment. Maybe it's a record you're listening to or a book you've been reading or something like that.
Yeah. Well, my favorite artist of all time is Willie Nelson,
Oh, right on.
and yeah, if you listen to Willie, um, you can kind of hear him sprinkled throughout the Ruthless record in some kind of weird and subtle ways or whatever. But
Oh, that I
the
like
one of
I had no idea, and that makes so much sense. Like I
yeah,
love I
exactly.
love Willie
Once you hear
Nelson,
that,
and like yeah,
yeah.
okay.
Well, and the thing is, my brother Nick, who plays drums in the band,
Uh-huh.
he always gives me such a hard time about my really awful sense of time. Like in my songwriting, I have a bad habit of like adding beats and
Yeah.
like just completely obliterating time signatures and stuff. And then it's usually
Uh,
a process of us trying to put things back into 4/4. Um, like what comes out of the gate is usually makes no sense.
yeah.
But I
Very, very
I
Willie-esque.
yeah, well, exactly. Like Nick, I've told Nick like, oh, the reason I I think I've listened to so much Willie that my phrasing in my vocal phrasing on the Ruthless record is not quite always on the beat. You know, I'm kind of dancing around the beat a little bit on certain songs.
Yeah.
And I was talking to Nick about that, and I was like, I feel like, man, I think Willie's just really gotten in there. And he's like, no, I think you've just always had a terrible sense of time, dude, and you just happen to find somebody who also is like that. But
It's just who
but
you are, and
anyway,
you're like, yeah, I'm like
it's
Willie Nelson. Give me a break.
Yeah, I'm really influenced by Willie, or I just have no sense of time. I don't know, man. But yeah, anyway, as far as like what I'm getting down with, the beautiful thing about Willie is the dude puts out like
Yeah.
two like two records a year at least for like always, and like bro, he doesn't miss.
Yeah.
They're just so good, every single one of them. But so yeah, he just put out this record that I've been listening to a ton. It's all covers of a guy, and I'm gonna blank on the songwriter's name. Like uh he wrote Buck Owens hit Tiger by the Tail, so Willie covered that song. But man, I'm blanking on the actual name of the songwriter, but it's all songs by this one songwriter that Willie liked, and they feel like songs that Willie wrote, which is part of what he's so good at. Is he takes a song that somebody else has written in so many cases, and they feel like he wrote them. I mean, like Blue Eyes Crying in the Rain, he didn't write that,
Right.
or Always on My Mind. He didn't write that one
You like
either.
that.
But like those are Willie songs, you know what I mean? So anyway, so I've been listening to a lot of Willie lately because I'm always listening to a lot of Willie.
Harlan Howard is the songwriter you're thinking of, I think.
Harlan Howard.
Yeah.
Yes, that's it. Yeah, Harlan Howard.
Folks
But
listening,
yeah,
I Googled that. Don't give me too much credit.
I knew it was an H. I was gonna say like Hank Cochran or something like that. I couldn't remember, but yeah, okay, yeah.
What's
yeah,
your
so
favorite? What's your favorite Willie record?
how much time we got, bro? Here we go. I think
I think our listeners would listen to a whole nother podcast of me and you talking about Willie Nelson.
Dude, you joke. I'd be up for it. I'm not joking. My vinyl Willie collection is kind of silly.
Oh,
I think
nice.
it's like 20 records and growing or something right now, which is like a little blip of his recorded material, which is just like freaking ridiculous.
It's in the
Again, like
hundreds. I forget what the number is,
it's
but
silly.
yeah.
Yeah, like that. Like I put out a record every 5 years, and Willie puts out 2 records every 8 months. It's just ridiculous. And he's 90. Like, come on. Like,
yeah.
Just a treasure. But yeah, my favorite, I would have to say, this is going to be controversial amongst like big time Willie fans.
Okay.
So like here we go, controversy. But my favorite record, I have to go with Always on My Mind. And it's because that was my gateway record into Willie. And it like Always on My Mind is a controversial record amongst Willie fans because it was kind of a pop record in a lot of ways. Like people that really love Willie's like country stuff, that record can feel a little bit confusing to him. It was like, and he'd been at it for a while. Like, record came out in the 80s, but like that record for me was my gateway because it was enough country to my not country ears at the time. This is like 8 years ago maybe that I got into this record, that it felt different than something that I'd ever heard before, and yet present in it are these like big ballad pianos that I love in so many songs, and like really sweet phasery chorused out delayed guitars that I love from bands like Drugs and whatever. And so it like had all these elements that I already loved, but it had a freshness to it. Like, man, that record is like, I dropped the needle on that one, and the entire way through is just like, this is my favorite song on the record. No, this is my favorite song on the record. Like, so, but from there, I think Tetro's really special. Spirit is probably my second. Oh, dude,
that's mine. Spirit's mine. Yeah.
Oh my goodness, I just finished reading a book. Again, I'm a big Willie fan. I just finished reading a book between Willie Nelson and his sister Bobby, who just passed away this past year. Called Me and Sister Bobby, and they talk a lot about making the record Spirit. It came on the heels of Bobby losing 2 of her kids in the span of like 2 months, and Willie losing one of his sons, and it was out of that they wrote some of the songs and covered some of the other ones for that one. And listening to those two talk about that record in that book I listened to the audiobook of it, and they both narrated it together. I cannot recommend that book, the audiobook specifically. Listening to those two read the book is just, it's it's incredible. So I've been getting
Dude.
down on Willie.
Yeah, that's awesome. I'm so glad you did, because well, I mean, I grew up with Willie. Willie was my mother's favorite artist, my father's favorite artist, or among my
Mhm.
father's favorite artists. When I remember as a kid, when I was getting into music, like really like that teenage time when you're really trying to learn about all the records that came before and all this kind of
For sure.
stuff. And
Your
uh
heritage, yeah.
yeah, exactly.
Musical heritage, yeah.
Yeah, and from Kentucky, grew up in South or in Central Florida, and all like country music's just in my blood. Like it's just a part of, it's what
Mhm.
I grew up on. And so I asked my dad, I was like, what, because albums, I got obsessed with albums, right? And I was like,
Yeah, dude, same.
what do you think is the greatest album of all time? And he's
Mhm.
not a huge music guy. And he was like, Willie Nelson's Redheaded Stranger. And so I went and got a
So
copy
good.
of Willie Nelson's Redheaded Stranger with my allowance money that weekend.
Heck yeah.
And then shortly thereafter, I forget what year Spirit came out, 93 or
That was a 90s record. Yeah, that was early
something like
90s, yeah.
that, four.
Yeah.
But I remember, like, because I would just go to this, I'd go to like Sam Goody or whatever, and I'd look through the CDs, and I'd go back to my favorite artists, and I'd always get their new stuff. And I remember that came out, and it has that cool picture of him on the
It is
cover's amazing.
arresting. That
Yeah,
cover is arresting. It just
yeah,
like you
yeah.
have to stop when you see that one. It's
Yeah.
incredible. Yeah.
And then you listen to that record, and it's just like I mean, he's done some of those kinds of things before, but
Yeah.
this was a totally different thing. And I just remember like going, oh, this is a thing. What music could sound like. It was one of those moments, right? Where you're just like,
Yeah.
this is a completely different thing from
Yeah.
anything I've experienced before. And
Hmm.
man, I don't know when you last listened to it. Sounds like recently, but
Kind of, yeah.
that record fucking holds up. I mean,
It does.
it is brilliant.
Dude, Matador, the opener on that record is like, find me a stronger like album opener that just like sets a feeling
Yeah. Yeah,
immediately.
yeah,
Like
yeah. Yeah. Oh my
like,
God.
oh my goodness. And like the way that Willie plays it too is he's such like he's like you're like, is he a total hack on guitar? And then he all of a sudden hits the next phrase and you're like, he's incredible.
Yeah,
And then he hits the
yeah.
next phrase and you're like, wait, is he just making this up? And then
Yeah.
the next phrase just is so intentional. Like you never he keeps you on your toes in that way. It's
Yeah.
dude.
It's amazing to see him play
Yeah.
live too. Like because especially, and I haven't seen him in a few years, but I've probably seen Willie 10 or 12 times live. And it's amazing to see him play guitar live. It's kind of,
Yeah.
it's like an interesting juxtaposition. You don't necessarily expect him to be so good, and he is.
Yeah.
He's
He's
really good
incredible.
in his own
I
way.
I am getting to see Willie Nelson for the very first time at the end of May.
Hell yeah.
I in Fargo. We're driving. My wife and I are driving to Fargo to go see him, and I'm like, I I I cannot wait. I
I'm
cannot
so
express
excited
to you
for you.
how excited I was in Austin, Texas for South by Southwest. Uh, I don't know, 6 7 years ago,
Mhm.
and the friend of mine that I was with, he's a really great band manager, and somehow he's a band manager, and so band managers just like they know people. Somehow he and I both got invited to like go hang at Willie's place,
Yeah. Oh my
and
God.
we didn't go. We were dude. I This is my least favorite. I'm smiling, but this is a story of pain.
Yeah.
We were at a Sylvanesso and Polisa and somebody else show in Austin, and uh, we're friends with some of the people playing in the bands, and we were just like having a good time. We were like, oh, we'd have to like get a cab, and have to like it just like for some reason it felt like an inconvenience to go hang out at Willie's place or something,
Yeah.
and so we just like we didn't go, and it
Yeah.
was like I think it was like a year after that is when all of a sudden I got like insanely into Willie, and that has haunted me ever since
Yeah.
then. That I like just I couldn't be bothered to go hang out with one of America's living legends. Like, oh, I'm like Sylvanesso and Polisa, they're freaking fantastic bands, but I
Yeah.
made a mistake.
Oh man,
So
I get that
yeah,
though. I've definitely been there in similar situations, but I'm stoked for you that you're gonna get to see Willie. That's gonna be awesome, man.
can't wait.
Gabe, this has been a much needed conversation for me. I am
Yeah,
so
same.
grateful for your time and energy. I'm so grateful for your beautiful record and the constant companionship it's provided me. And I'm really excited for
Mhm.
folks to hear it. Dude, thank you.
Thank you, dude. Thank you. Yeah, this has been a blast chatting.
Awesome.
And I'm honored that you love it and that you wanted to chat about it, dude. This has been great. Yeah, dude.
Awesome. Man, well, have a great rest of your day, and I hope to see you down the road.
Yeah, likewise, man.
All right.
It's where I grow. What's the difference between poignancy and simple reckless cruelty? I'm caught more.
Gabe Larson, y'all. Thank you so much, Gabe. Thank all of you for listening. WaldemarMusic.com for all things Waldemar. The song you're hearing in this episode is Limbo, which is the first track on the forthcoming Ruthless album. I can't say enough about the record. You can pre-order a copy over on the Waldemar website, marinadepodcast.com for all things The Marinade, including written pieces, photography, our online store, which desperately needs updating, and more. Follow us on Instagram, TikTok, Spoutable, and Twitter. Subscribe and give us a 5-star rating on your podcast app. Tell a friend about the show. These are all free ways to support The Marinade. If you really like what we're doing, please consider joining our Patreon community, where for just a few bucks a month, you can gain access to Patreon exclusive content like our show, Jason's Journey, where I talk about the moments that shape my creative life and provide a window into the process of making The Marinade. We have a fairly new monthly show called What We're Getting Down On over on Patreon. It's a conversation between me and my good friend Peter Haraldson, where we talk about the art that has us inspired at the moment, and we're having an absolute blast with that show. Also, check out our show Inner Child, where I ask our guests childlike questions such as a favorite food, dream car, TV show, stuff like that. If you want to support the show financially, but you don't want to commit to a monthly subscription, I totally get that. You can Venmo or PayPal us just at The Marinade. All the money goes right back into making the show. We've got some festivals we want to cover. We've got some equipment that we want to buy, and every little bit helps. So we're really grateful if you can swing it to help us financially. But above all, we're just thankful that you listen. Thank you for listening. Thank you for spreading the word about The Marinade. Until next time, go out and create something. Cheers, y'all.